Thank you very much. So, good afternoon, everybody, or perhaps good morning if you've just got in from the States. As Adrian says, I'm interpreting the world in the session title here, primarily in terms of the world of the information industry. I'll be presenting a very rapid tour around some of the trends that we think are important right now in 2012. And I'll be deliberately drawing inspiration and examples from outside the core scholarly publishing arena. And hopefully that will be interesting. And then we come to the end, and unlike Mary, I'm going to try and pull things together and make some sketchy predictions about where these trends might be leading. And that's in the UK sense of sketchy, rough or unfinished, not in the US sense of dangerous, suspicious, immoral or illegal. Not to spend too long on the numbers, but the information industry, $462 billion industry in 2011, according to Outsell's estimates. That makes it roughly the size of the GDP of Malaysia, or for Radio 4 fans, that's about 6.3 times the GDP of Wales. Outsell sizes the STM industry within that at nearly $30 billion. That includes sectors that are a little bit distant from people in this room, the geophysical data sector, mapping, satellite, seismic data and so on. If we strip that out, then we see the core STM business as being about $23, $24 billion. One thing to note from this graph here is that the market is the STM market is not cyclical, and that's, as we know, because of its relatively low reliance on advertising, or one of the primary reasons. So it was much less affected by the 2008-2009 recession than the information industry as a whole. But growth rates are still modest, relatively low single-digit growth rates predicted for the foreseeable future. And much of that actually is concentrated in a few bright spots, with the core library market very flat, but bright spots actually in the geophysical sector, in online databases, tools, workflow systems, emerging markets, and mobile and e-book sector. Looking quickly around the world, Tom will be talking a lot more detail in this area, but just big picture stuff here. Clearly the world's biggest market is still the US, but not for very much longer, perhaps. The fastest growing by far is Asia Pacific, as we know. Over the 5 years to this report, the STM market saw compound growth of 12.5% annually. Now, we're all fully digital, aren't we? The transition to fully digital revenues, I mean, in a way, one can say here that it's at least steady year on year. The line and the trend moves in the same direction, but we're very far from an overnight transition. This particular graph is for the information industry as a whole, as analysed by Outsell, but the figures are actually quite similar for STM. Currently a bit under 60% digital, a bit under 40% print, and the balance from in-person. Now, part of that's about definition and how you allocate, but there's still quite a way to go. The digital fraction here is growing at about 2 percentage points a year, so it'll be a little while unless something changes fast. So, the fundamental industry drivers are, of course, as they always are, economic and technological. So we are seeing some political influences coming to bear, copyright and open access, to mention two. The information industry as a whole, as we saw a couple of slides back, will only, in fact, recover the levels that it had, revenue levels, in 2008, sometime this year, which makes a pretty long recession and slow growth going out. As I mentioned, structurally, Asia is on track to overtake the European market area within a few years. So historical ideas that we perhaps grew up with about the shape of the world and regional dominance need to be revised. This is our theme, of breaking previous understandings and expectations and resetting. So against that backdrop, here are the trends that we think are important to 2012. Some of these carried over from 2011, they weren't new, and others were new. I'm going to go through each in turn, so I'm not going to read them out now. So our first trend is mobile, social, and the rise of GAFA. That's Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple. And you might think I'm cheating here a bit by combining multiple trends into one, but I'm not, because we see Google, Amazon, Apple, and Facebook, and these other things as merging into a single platform, a single environment, if you like, driving the consumer realm, the consumer expectation, and consequently pulling behind them the professional realm. Only a couple of years back, we were talking in consultant speak of GYM, G-Y-M. That was Google, Yahoo, and Microsoft. Yahoo no longer seems that important. Probably too early to write off Microsoft. But these are the players who are forming the dominant platform at this point. Facebook, with its 950 million active monthly users, 550 million daily active users, nearly 550 million daily active users on mobile. This is the environment. In 2011, Outsell surveyed information managers, corporate librarians, and so this is, bear in mind, this is nearly a year old now, and they said that their companies, 24% said that their companies supported the iPad up, and that was up from 5% the previous year. This is becoming a tool of choice for professionals. Now, uptake of social media by researchers, academic researchers and professionals is notoriously low. As Rin said in the report, you can build it, but they won't come. In my view, though, this just can't not change because of the environment that they live in. And one of the reasons is that these tools become more and more integrated within operating systems, in Apple's new operating system, within software, and within STM publishing platforms, as in this example. Here, the user can log in with their LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook credentials. They can comment using the Facebook widget, which is integrated into the platform, so that the comment appears simultaneously on the journal platform and in their Facebook page. And suck in articles from Mendeley. Article level metrics will also create greater exposure to these ideas, creating a feedback loop. Now, what's the next big thing? Well, consultants have been telling us for a while now the next big thing is big data. It's hard to get away from it. Everything about it is big, including the hype. The tools to handle this big data and the huge quantities that are generated by the web, and increasingly in the future, or now and in the future, from sensors and mobile devices, have already been developed by, again, Facebook, Amazon, and Google, Hadoop and MapReduce. But what's still in short supply are the tech people and the managers and the publishers and the creative people who know how to design and exploit it. Outsell has forecasts that the ability to monetize analytics, that is, to be able to mine data to build new products, generate new incomes, is going to be the key differentiating factor for the leading B2B companies. Well, what about STM? When I talk to publishers in the area, they say, yeah, it sounds great, but what do we do? So one example I have here is Relay Technology, a startup company backed by Nature Publishing Group, which launched this year, although it's been operating in stealth mode for a couple of years, providing an analytic dashboard for the pharmacos and others in the life sciences industry, derived from mashing up data from a wide range of sources, scientific, business, news, some free, some licensed. A key part of its value, are the algorithms which it's developed, which allow it to place a valuation index, a relative valuation index, on drug targets, and allowing them to say, within this measure, whether particular targets are under or overvalued at a particular time. That's software. I love this quote: citation data is the business intelligence of academic research. That quote is from JISC, of all people. So this example is the growing interest in mining citation and other bibliometric data for research analysis purposes. So this, the graphic here is from a study that Elsevier did for the UK government, for BIS. But Thomson Reuters and Nature Publishing Group again, and others, are also developing products in this area. It's partly about adding that value that we heard about earlier. So our next trend, third trend, is what we call our focused scale. So the information industry is littered with highly targeted niche businesses, but the market share leaders are driving focused scale. Companies like McGraw-Hill, Thomson, Pearson, IHS, Gartner are dominant and compete on scale, but they do so with deep emphasis in a topical area or areas. What they're doing is they're building out and up and back along the value chain to be able to create and offer value to their client that goes beyond what might sit in the products which they happen to have. And interestingly, in that process, they can't help but bump up against their own clients and their suppliers. And hence we see more and more that co-opetition is becoming the norm. So it's this kind of thinking that lies behind these periodic calls for read Elsevier to get broken up. While Elsevier itself, to my mind, exemplifies the trend by constantly building out through acquisition and internal development on the Cyberse platform. Other examples of this trend, I think, are the sell-offs of perfectly good businesses, but subscale, that allow the parents to increase their focus. Partly as a result of this emphasis on focused scale of the strategy, we're seeing, perhaps surprisingly, no let-up in the volume of M&A activity in the information industry. Perhaps surprising given the economic downturn. What we're seeing, though, is that the number of deals are staying rough. There's a bit of a dip, but the trend line has continued, whereas the value of the deals has dropped substantially. These are targeted, focused bolt-on acquisitions, not the so-called transformative deals, which incidentally, almost all research shows destroys value. Another M&A trend that I think is very interesting is the reversal of the direction of trans-regional investment. So, interesting, Wolters Kluwer buys Indian publishing company Medno, open access publisher. I think perhaps more interesting, Indian company Piramal buys US drug data company Decision Resources in what was the largest outbound acquisition from India in the year. I was rereading the UNESCO Science Report, as you do, and really struck by this quote. What they see, and this was, I think, a year or two back when it was written, a structural break in the pattern of knowledge contribution to economic growth at the level of the global economy. In other words, countries lagging behind can grow faster than the leaders by leapfrogging on unexploited technology and do so at lower risk, because they're picking up work that's already been done. So these countries will increasingly opt for cross-border M&A to get technology knowledge or other technology and R&D related benefits. And one thing I didn't know from the same report, incidentally, that Bangladesh creates jobs in light engineering, but it's also now self-sufficient in pharmaceuticals and exporting to Europe. That certainly reset my perception. The next trend is aggregation. Boring, how long has this been around? But aggregation seems to be the phenomenon that won't go away. With large sets of information comes the need to organize it, to understand it, visualize it, to use it. Large sets of information clearly aren't going away, whether it's Twitter feeds, web scraping, business intelligence, Flipboard, individual level collective networks. Deciding how to use, select, winnow, manage information is here to stay. It's also a way that we'll see the industry companies continuing to build out this focused scale, this presence within the value chain by partnering information partners to better serve their customers. Now, another word for aggregation is curation. And this is evident when you consider the social dimension. So on the left of my rough and ready graph, aggregation products like clinical reference tools, like OvidMD, Clinical Key, etc., add tremendous amount of value through the efforts and investments of their publishers. Elsevier building their own medical taxonomy to sit behind clinical key. Not an easy or a cheap thing to do. On the right, the aggregation and a lot of the value added of the Mendeley network derives from the work done by the users in uploading their uploading articles, or is emergent from the network itself. An open question is the parallel issue for STM publishers of how closely different STM contents will type to merge. We like to talk about content convergence. And in clinical fields, the value is in ever more synoptic workflow content, fast answers at the bedside. But in most fields, and indeed in medicine, books and journals will continue to serve different needs. But clearly there's going to be value in aggregating them together for search and for other purposes. Next trend, fun and gamification. At first I thought I was going to struggle to find examples in STM, but using game interfaces and strategies to drive performance and user engagement is a universal motivator. Here are some examples from STM or science related, and starting in the bottom right hand corner, it was great to hear on Radio 4 this morning at 7:40 the Galaxy Zoo people talking up here. This is a great example of collaboration, citizen science, whatever you want to call it. But what was interesting about this, if you know the history of the participation, is the thing that really got users clicking on those galaxies was when they published leaderboards, and people just wanted to be the top of that leaderboard. Other examples here, Septris, which neatly combines the Tetris game with education and learning on the management of sepsis. And I've got to tell you, I was there when it was shown to Guy Kawasaki at the Highwire Publishers meeting, and he was just addicted to it almost immediately. It's fun, but really a useful learning tool. The Image Challenge app, I think the New England Journal of Medicine was one of the first to try these. It's been copied by, here, Jackson. Copied, yes, copied. Quick, fun, you can pull it out of your pocket and do a couple of little bits, when you might have done Sudoku if you'd been that kind of person, and surely much better than that. Our next trend is, I think, more of a prediction, possibly more of a hope, than a detailed observation backed by data. And the thought is that the more digital our world becomes, the more the physical elements matter. People like to connect with people. And customer service will be an important differentiator. It's important to people slugging it out for market scale with similar properties. It's often a differentiator for the niche player. No one's saying that content and functionality don't matter, but the human touch can be a differentiator. So, example from the financial services industry, in this case in the US, Morningstar invested $7 million in this startup Hello Wallet, which offers personalized financial guidance to employees of Fortune 1000 companies. They stress their human touch, promoting their friendly team of humans with the tagline, humans are better to talk to. As indeed they are. Sales 2.0, buying and selling goods, is changing dramatically. Consumers have unprecedented pricing information as a result of the web, comparison shopping, daily deals, you name it. Tremendous shift in power from sellers to buyers, we saw earlier. How pricing is perhaps still not quite as transparent as it could be in our own industry, but more and more within professional fields, not just in consumer world, more and more is being bought direct from the web. That's the quote here. It changes the nature of sales and the nature of the sales operation. So as STM publishers move from a product-centric offering, say, collection of medical journals or books, to solutions, horrible word, but a clinical decision support system, say, or a legal point of decision reference tool. The sales and marketing team, strategy, reach, approach, who do you talk to, change completely. You need different people doing different things at different levels. Indeed, you may well become more like a systems integrator, selling at board level, selling in the way that the librarian was talking earlier, on the basis of value added, rather than how many articles are in my database. Another example in STM is the renewed interest in the individual consumer. We heard earlier how individual subscriptions were once important, particularly to society journals, but had declined, as we all know, consistently over 40 years. Whether then we're talking about the new or newish article rental models, whether we're talking about the author as customer, or whether we're talking about in-app purchases on mobile devices, which of course are done by individuals through their personal credit cards. These are all examples that would require, I think, a focus on a consumer-style marketing, consumer-level customer service that's been entirely alien to most STM publishers, and most of whom don't have the back-end systems to handle them. We could hardly be looking at trends in the information industry without talking about open and closed, a crucial area for debate, whether the dialogue is about Apple versus Android, or open education, or the open access movements in our own world. What's clear is that the open offerings, right across the range, not just in STM, are providing robust and high-value solutions, free or little cost at the point of use, gaining broad acceptance and taking their place at the table. In our own world, open access is no longer just for journal research articles. There's growing interest in open access books, and the open educational resources, OER market, has exploded in the last year in particular, with launch of startups like Coursera, Udacity, and recently the edX Consortium, offering not just content but accreditation. Okay. If I can stretch the term open in the sense of open platforms, that is really ones with open APIs, will almost certainly be the dominant approach. Closed islands of content that can't be linked to and integrated with other data will lose value. And this is what was behind this TechCrunch headline. Mendeley's Open API recently passed 100 million calls per month, allowing third-party developers to build an ecosystem of over 100 apps and services. I'm told some people see Siri as more than a toy, but either way, Watson, success visualization, voice recognition, eye tracking, facial recognition are all here now, so the Minority Report style interfaces and adaptive billboards can't be far behind. The information industry is unlikely to be innovators in this area for obvious reasons of R&D investments, but they will be there, and we need to find ways, I think, to take advantage of them. The search box isn't going to go away, but increasingly we're going to see ways of delivering information that aren't directly driven by it. So Google already lets us search the web with pictures. It's easy to see how valuable this might be in STM applications. I don't know, in instant diagnosis, species identification, structural analysis, your imagination. So, to sum up for STM, I see a set of challenges that are mostly long-standing, increasingly complex, data-driven, data-rich content, increasing industry funding for R&D, buyers and users both wanting, as we heard earlier, more than just access to content, leading to a future direction that will increasingly be about higher value-added services, moving from a product-centric to a service-oriented approach. Something that inevitably means that publishers will start to become more like technology companies. Like it or not, partnerships, co-opetition will become the norm, whether through extremely close relationships, loose relationships based on using APIs, or through tight embraces or acquisitions. Open resources and services will play a growing role. So what do we do? To survive and thrive, publishers need to understand their users' workflow in much more depth than ever before. We think we understand, but we understand at the most superficial and sketchy level in many cases. Building a coherent mobile strategy will be critical, not least because of the opportunities it gives to make users' lives easier in the face of information overload and faster-paced, more complex, more closely regulated workloads. Fundamentally, STM publishers are going to have to learn from Silicon Valley, start to innovate and to disrupt their own markets. So, to stick my neck out, if all these trends come to pass, what do we see? All services are digital. Well, okay. All services are mobile proficient and reflect high user expectations set in the consumer space for information at the point they want it, at the point of reference, at the point of care, at the point of decision, wherever they need it. Services are fully customizable to groups of network users, that is, customizable to companies, to HEIs, to organizations, but also fully personalizable to the individual. All services will have high inbuilt intelligence factors and will observe standards that allow maximum interoperability. Services will be funded by multiple revenue sources, not just subscriptions, involving multiple players behind the scenes with revenue reconciliation systems which are not apparent to the user. All services will be delivered by the cloud, so they're entirely agnostic as to what and where the user chooses to access them. So, if all this comes to pass, I'll expect you all to buy me a pint, and I'll be around to collect. Of course, if it doesn't, then you'll not hear from me. So, thank you very much.